I discovered it while scrolling through social media on a quiet Tuesday morning. My daughter-in-law, Heather, had posted a family photo from our last Christmas gathering, with my face circled in bright red. The caption read, "If you could erase one person from the family, who would you choose? You know my choice." Her family filled the comments with laughing emojis and cruel jokes at my expense. My hands shook as I typed my response. "The house you're living in isn't your husband's, it's mine. And I just voted to erase you from my property." In that moment, I unleashed a family crisis that would expose years of manipulation, force painful truths into the open, and test whether blood truly is thicker than water. My name is Ross Williams. At 65 years old, I've spent most of my life building things with my hands. First, a construction company that grew from just me and a pickup truck to 50 employees and millions in contracts. But more importantly, I built a life for my son Jack after my wife Sarah died of breast cancer when he was just 12 years old. Those early years after Sarah passed were the hardest of my life. I'd come home exhausted from pouring concrete or framing houses all day to find Jack quietly doing homework at the kitchen table. Sometimes I'd catch him looking at photos of his mother, tears streaming down his face. I knew nothing about raising a child on my own, but I promised Sarah I'd give him everything she would have wanted for him. So I worked harder, took on more jobs, saved every penny, and made sure Jack never felt the absence of love, even when we both felt the absence of Sarah. By the time Jack was in high school, my company had grown enough that I could attend his football games and help with college applications. I remember the day the acceptance letter from State University arrived. Jack's face lit up as he ripped open the envelope, and I felt a surge of pride knowing Sarah would have been so proud too. "Dad, I got in!" he shouted, waving the letter. "I never doubted it for a second, son," I told him, pulling him into a bear hug. "Your mom would be over the moon right now." I paid for his college in full. No student loans, no part-time jobs unless he wanted spending money. I wanted him focused on his education, on building his future. It was during his junior year that he met Heather Daniels, a marketing major with ambitious plans and a dazzling smile. The first time Jack brought her home during spring break, I tried my best to make her feel welcome. I barbecued steaks, cleaned the house top to bottom, and even bought flowers for the dining table, something Sarah would have done. "It's so nice to finally meet you, Mr. Williams," Heather said, offering a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Jack talks about you all the time. All good things, I hope." I laughed, noticing how she surveyed our home, eyes lingering on the modest furniture and outdated kitchen. "Of course, Dad," Jack said, his arm around her waist. "I tell her how you built this company from nothing." I saw something flash in Heather's eyes then. Interest, calculation. I dismissed it as the natural curiosity about her boyfriend's family. Over the next year, as their relationship grew serious, I made every effort to welcome Heather. I took them to nice restaurants when they visited, asked about her studies, her family, her dreams. She was polite but always maintained a certain distance that I couldn't quite bridge. When Jack announced they were engaged shortly after graduation, I was genuinely happy for him. He seemed in love. And isn't that what every parent wants for their child? The morning after their engagement, I took Jack fishing, just the two of us on the lake where we'd spent countless weekends when he was growing up. "I want to help you two get started," I told him as we sat waiting for the fish to bite. "I've been saving for your future since the day you were born." "Dad, you don't have to do that," Jack protested, but I could see the relief in his eyes. "I want to," I insisted. "Your mother would want me to." What I didn't tell Jack that day was that I'd already been looking at houses. 3 weeks later, I found the perfect starter home in a good neighborhood about 20 minutes from my place. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a fenced backyard, and a kitchen Heather had once described as her dream. I purchased it outright, planning to surprise them after the wedding. For tax purposes and on the advice of my accountant, I kept the house in my name, intending to transfer ownership to Jack when the time was right. Their wedding day was beautiful. Sarah would have cried seeing her boy in that tuxedo, watching him begin his own family. After the reception, I handed Jack an envelope. "What's this?" he asked, Heather looking on curiously. "The keys to your new home," I said, watching their faces. "Consider it my wedding gift to you both." Jack was speechless. his eyes filling with tears as he hugged me tightly. Heather's reaction was more measured, a calculated smile as she thanked me. "That's so generous, Ross." "We can't thank you enough." I brushed off her formality. "Family takes care of family. That's what we do." The first few years seemed good. Jack joined my company, learning the business from the ground up just as I had. Heather found work at a marketing firm and seemed to be building her career. I tried to give them space, visiting only when invited, bringing thoughtful gifts on birthdays and holidays. Yet despite my efforts, Heather remained cool toward me, her smiles never warming, her conversations never deepening beyond surface pleasantries. At family gatherings, I noticed how she'd steer Jack away from me, how conversations would halt when I approached. I told myself it was nothing, that she was just protective of her relationship, that in time, we would grow closer. Then came the family reunion last month. Jack's extended family gathered at his cousin Amy's lake house for a weekend of barbecues, swimming, and catching up. I was sitting on the deck, nursing a beer, and watching the younger kids splash in the lake, when I overheard Heather talking to Amy just around the corner. "Honestly, I can't wait until Ross finally kicks the bucket," Heather said, her voice low but clear. "Then Jack and I can finally get what's coming to us." "Heather!" Amy sounded shocked. "That's a horrible thing to say." "Oh, please," Heather scoffed. "The old man has been controlling Jack's life forever. He only gave us that house so he could hold it over our heads. Did you know he still hasn't transferred it to our names? 5 years later, and he's still playing his games." "I'm sure he has his reasons," Amy said uncomfortably. "His reason is control," Heather snapped. "Well, he won't live forever, and when he's gone, everything he built will be ours. The company, the house, all of it." I sat frozen, the beer warming in my hand as their conversation shifted to other topics. I couldn't process what I'd just heard. The naked ambition in her voice, the casual way she spoke about my death. Was this how she truly saw me? As an obstacle to be removed? A countdown to an inheritance? That night, I lay awake in the guest room of Amy's house, turning her words over in my mind. Had I misunderstood? Was I being overly sensitive? I tried to recall every interaction with Heather over the years, searching for signs I might have missed. By morning, I had convinced myself that I'd overreacted. Surely, she was just venting, the way people sometimes do about in-laws. I resolved to make more of an effort with Heather, to somehow bridge the gap between us. But as the following days unfolded, I began noticing things I'd overlooked before. How Jack rarely called me unless he needed something. How Heather always seemed to have a reason why they couldn't attend dinners at my home. How Jack had gradually stopped asking for my advice at work, instead implementing changes without consultation. I was still wrestling with these realizations when I discovered Heather's social media post. And suddenly, everything became painfully clear. 2 weeks after the family reunion, I was sitting in my home office, scrolling through social media to check on pictures from the gathering. That's when I saw it. Heather had posted a family photo where everyone was gathered on Amy's deck. My face was circled in bright red, and the caption made my heart sink. "If you could erase one person from the family, who would you choose? You know my choice." I stared at the screen, unable to believe what I was seeing. But worse than the post itself were the comments beneath it. "Oh my God, Heather, you're so bad," wrote Heather's sister. "Someone call the burn unit." "Poor Ross," added her brother. "That control freak?" "Good choice," commented someone I didn't recognize. And on it went. Dozens of responses, each one a fresh cut. But what hurt most of all was seeing that Jack had liked the post. My own son, endorsing this public humiliation. With shaking hands, I reached for my phone and called Jack. He answered on the 4th ring, sounding distracted. "Hey Dad, what's up?" "I'm kind of in the middle of something. I just saw Heather's post," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The one with my face circled. There was a pause, then a sigh. "Dad, it's just a joke. Heather was just messing around. You know how social media is." "A joke?" I repeated. "Jack?" She asked who people would erase from the family and circled my face. "How is that a joke?" "You're being too sensitive," he said dismissively. "It's not a big deal. Look, I gotta go. We can talk about this later, okay? He hung up before I could respond, leaving me sitting there with the phone in my hand and a hollow feeling in my chest. Too sensitive? Not a big deal? When had my son become someone who thought public mockery of his father was acceptable? That evening, I couldn't sleep. Jack's response kept replaying in my mind, along with Heather's words at the reunion. On a hunch, I opened my laptop and began digging through old emails and documents. As the owner of the construction company, I still had access to all financial records, though I'd been taking a more hands-off approach in recent years as Jack took on more responsibility. What I found sent a chill down my spine. Over the past 18 months, Jack had been making questionable financial decisions. Nothing illegal, but concerning nonetheless. Resources allocated to projects that showed minimal returns. Contracts awarded to new suppliers despite higher costs. And most troubling of all, regular meetings with Bradley Construction, our biggest competitor, listed discreetly in his calendar as networking lunches. I dug deeper, pulling phone records for the company's cell phone Jack used. Numerous calls to Bradley Construction, some lasting over an hour. What was my son discussing with our competitors for that long? Sleep evaded me completely that night. By morning, I had moved from confusion to a gnawing suspicion that something was very wrong. I called my old friend Paul, who had retired from the company 2 years earlier but still kept in touch with many of our employees. "Paul, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me," I said when he answered. "Have you heard anything unusual about Jack's activities at the company?" Paul's hesitation told me everything before he even spoke. "Ross, I was hoping you knew. Some of the guys have been talking. Jack's been having a lot of closed-door meetings, bringing in consultants without explaining who they are. There are rumors he's planning some big changes." "What kind of changes?" Another pause. "The kind that might not include you, Ross." After hanging up with Paul, I made another disturbing discovery. Scrolling through my digital calendar, I noticed several family events from the past year that I had supposedly declined. Amy's son's graduation party, my nephew's wedding, my niece's baby shower, events I had never received invitations to in the first place. I called Amy directly. "Amy, did you invite me to Tyler's graduation party last spring?" "Of course I did, Uncle Ross," she said, sounding confused. "I sent the invitation to Jack and Heather to pass along, and Jack told me you weren't feeling up to social gatherings at that time. Said you'd been having some health issues." "Health issues? I hadn't even had a cold in the past year. And the save the date for Daniel's wedding? And Jessica's baby shower?" Amy's voice grew concerned. "Ross, are you saying you never got those invitations? Jack told everyone you were cutting back on family events to focus on your health?" He said. "He said you were having some memory problems, and large gatherings were becoming difficult for you." The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture that made me sick to my stomach. I hadn't been imagining the distance growing between me and the extended family. Jack and Heather had been systematically cutting me off, controlling which invitations reached me and what information about me reached others. I thanked Amy and hung up, my mind racing. That evening, I sat in my living room with a glass of bourbon, contemplating my next move. The house I had purchased for Jack and Heather suddenly felt like a weapon being used against me. The company I had built from nothing was being undermined from within. And my own son, the boy I had raised alone and given everything to, was complicit in it all. As I took a sip of bourbon, my phone buzzed with a notification. Another comment on Heather's post. This one from my brother-in-law. "Some people just don't know when their time has passed." Something hardened inside me then, a resolution that cut through the hurt and betrayal. If this was how they wanted to play it, then it was time I stopped being a passive participant in my own erasure. The next morning, I contacted a private investigator. The private investigator, Frank Delgado, was a former police detective with 30 years of experience and a no-nonsense attitude. We met at a diner 20 miles outside of town, away from any prying eyes that might report back to Jack or Heather. "I need to know what I'm dealing with," I told him after explaining the situation. "I need facts, not suspicions." Frank nodded, making notes in a small black notebook. "Family situations are always the messiest. I'll be discreet, but thorough. Give me 2 weeks." Those 2 weeks were among the longest of my life. I went through the motions at work, careful to maintain the appearance of the semi-retired owner, gradually stepping back. Jack seemed relieved by my reduced presence, which only deepened my sadness. Had it always been this way? And I'd been too blind to see it? When Frank finally called for a meeting, he arrived with a manila envelope thick with documents. "I think you should prepare yourself," he said gravely, sliding the envelope across the table. "What I found isn't pretty." Inside were printouts of emails, text messages, and recorded conversations that painted a disturbing picture. Heather had been systematically working to isolate me, not just from family events, but from my company as well. Text messages between her and Jack revealed their strategy. "Your dad needs to let go completely," Heather had written. "He's a controlling old man who doesn't realize his time is done. We need to push him into full retirement before he ruins everything we've been planning." Another exchange revealed Heather's irritation when I'd stopped by their house unannounced with soup when Jack had the flu. "He treats you like you're still 12. It's pathetic. When is he going to understand this is our life?" But most disturbing were the emails between Jack and a corporate restructuring consultant, discussing ways to remove me from decision-making processes without triggering clauses in the company bylaws that protected my ownership interests. "Your father's age can be leveraged," the consultant had written. "Document any instances of forgetfulness or confusion. Create a paper trail suggesting cognitive decline. It's much easier to remove him for medical reasons than to force him out directly." I felt physically ill reading the calculated way they were plotting against me. The son I had raised, the boy I had given everything for, was actively working to push me out of my own company under false pretenses. Frank had more. "Your daughter-in-law has been busy," he said, pulling out another set of documents. "She's been telling family members and close friends that you're showing early signs of dementia. She's suggested to several people that your erratic behavior and paranoia are concerning the family." "Paranoia?" I repeated. "According to her, you've been accusing people of stealing from you, forgetting conversations, and becoming belligerent when confronted about memory lapses." Frank's expression was sympathetic, but professional, none of which appears to be true based on my investigation. I thought about all the times over the past year when relatives had looked at me with concern, asked pointedly about my health, offered to help with tasks I was perfectly capable of handling myself. It hadn't been kindness, it had been Heather's lies taking root. "There's more," Frank said reluctantly. "Your son's financial situation isn't what it appears to be." Bank statements showed significant withdrawals from Jack and Heather's joint account over the past 2 years, money that couldn't be accounted for by their normal expenses. Further investigation revealed Jack had a separate account Heather didn't know about, into which he deposited large sums regularly. "He's gambling," Frank confirmed. "Sports betting mostly, but some online poker too. He's in deep, Ross. Based on what I've seen, he's down at least $150,000. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Jack had never shown any interest in gambling before. When had this started? How had I missed the signs? Does Heather know? Frank shook his head. All evidence suggests she's in the dark about this particular issue. She knows they have money problems, but she thinks it's because you're not paying Jack enough at the company. In fact, there are several texts where she complains about how you're deliberately underpaying him to maintain control. I thanked Frank for his thorough work and drove home in a daze, the envelope of evidence heavy on the passenger seat beside me. That evening, I spread the documents across my kitchen table, trying to make sense of how my life had unraveled so completely without my awareness. The next day, I decided to confront Jack about the company finances during our weekly management meeting. I brought up discrepancies I'd noticed in the quarterly reports, careful to frame my concerns as routine oversight rather than accusations. "These numbers don't add up, Jack," I said, pointing to the spreadsheet before us. "We're showing a 15% increase in materials cost, but only a 5% increase in project bids. That's eating straight into our profits." Jack shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "We've had to make some adjustments to stay competitive. Bradley Construction has been undercutting us." "Bradley's materials costs are the same as ours," I countered. I checked. "So either we're being overcharged by suppliers, or there's money going somewhere it shouldn't be." A flash of something, anger, fear, crossed Jack's face before he composed himself. "Dad, are you sure you're remembering the last quarter's figures correctly? We discussed this already. You signed off on the changes yourself." "I never signed off on these numbers," I said firmly. Jack sighed, exchanging glances with the project manager Tom, who looked uncomfortable. Dad, you did. Look, I have the email right here. He pulled up a message on his phone, showing my apparent approval. I had sent no such email. The realization that Jack was now actively gaslighting me, trying to make me doubt my own memory, sent a wave of both sadness and determination through me. Let's table this for now, I said evenly, not wanting to escalate the confrontation until I had my next steps planned. We can revisit the numbers tomorrow. That weekend, I hosted a family dinner at my home. Jack and Heather arrived late, offering thin excuses about traffic. Throughout the evening, I observed how Heather subtly undermined me at every opportunity. Ross, should you be having wine with those medications you're on? She asked loudly, when I poured myself a glass, despite the fact that I took no regular medications beyond a daily multivitamin. Remember, Dad likes his steak well done now, she told Jack as we prepared to grill, though I'd always preferred my steak medium rare, and nothing had changed. When I mentioned a recent trip I'd taken to visit an old friend in Colorado, Heather gave Jack a meaningful look. That's not right, Ross. You haven't been to Colorado in years. You're thinking of when Jack and I went last summer. Each comment was designed to plant seeds of doubt about my mental acuity, both in my own mind and in the perception of others present. It was subtle psychological warfare, and I realized it had probably been happening for longer than I'd noticed. After dinner, as everyone was leaving, my friend Paul pulled me aside. Ross, we need to talk, he said quietly. Jack's been meeting with lawyers. Corporate lawyers who specialize in ownership transitions. Forcible ones. A chill ran down my spine. How do you know this? Marlene from accounting saw the billing statement. She came to me because she was concerned. Ross, I think they're planning to push you out completely. The next day, I retrieved my will from the safe in my home office, a document I hadn't reviewed in several years. As I read through it, I discovered modifications I had never authorized. Clauses that would give Jack immediate and complete control of all my assets upon my death, with no protections or conditions I had originally included. The changes were subtle but significant, and the signature at the bottom, while similar to mine, showed signs of forgery when I examined it closely. I was still reeling from this discovery when Frank called with one final piece of evidence. Heather had been secretly recording our conversations, editing them to remove context, and playing the manipulated recordings for family members. I have proof, Frank said. One of her friends got uncomfortable with the deception and provided me with both the original recording from your birthday dinner last year and the edited version Heather circulated. In the original, we were discussing a news story about a senior center where staff had neglected residents. It's criminal, I could be heard saying. Those poor people being mistreated, denied proper care. If I ever found out something like that was happening to someone I knew, I'd lose my mind. That kind of neglect is inexcusable. In Heather's edited version, only fragments remained. It's criminal. Those people. Denied proper care. I'd lose my mind. Inexcusable. Out of context, it sounded like an irrational outburst, supporting the narrative of mental decline she was crafting. As I hung up the phone, a cold clarity washed over me. This wasn't just family friction or a difficult daughter-in-law. This was a coordinated campaign to destroy my reputation, take my company, and erase me from my own family narrative. I had spent decades building, providing, and caring for others. Now it was time to protect myself. For the next few weeks, I appeared to withdraw. I came into the office less frequently, declined social invitations, and generally gave the impression of a man beginning to concede defeat. In reality, I was laying groundwork. My first step was finding a new lawyer. Margaret Chen from Chen, Wiseman, and Associates came highly recommended for elder law and business succession cases. In her 50s with steel gray hair and incisive questions, she projected exactly the competence and discretion I needed. Based on what you've shared, Mr. Williams, we're looking at a coordinated effort to undermine your authority and potentially commit fraud, she said after reviewing the evidence I'd gathered. The good news is that we can protect your assets and your company. The bad news is that this will likely permanently damage your relationship with your son and daughter-in-law. I think they've already done that damage, I replied, the words painful even as I spoke them. We spent hours going through my options. Margaret helped me secure my business interests, drafting new bylaws that protected against the kind of takeover Jack had been planning. We created a revocable trust to protect my personal assets, including the house Jack and Heather lived in. The property records confirm the house is solely in your name, Margaret noted. They have no ownership claim whatsoever. You could sell it tomorrow if you wanted to. I wasn't ready for such a drastic step, still hoping there might be some way to repair my relationship with Jack. But knowing I had options gave me a sense of security I desperately needed. While Margaret handled the legal side, I reached out to my sister-in-law Linda, Sarah's sister, who had always remained close to our family after Sarah's passing. She lived in Oregon now, but flew in. When I explained I needed to talk about something important regarding Jack, we met at her hotel, where I shared everything I had discovered. Linda was horrified, but not entirely surprised. I've noticed how Heather controls Jack's interactions with the family, she admitted. Last Christmas, she told me you'd refused their invitation to spend the holiday with them, that you'd said you needed space. I thought it was odd, but I didn't want to pry. I never received any invitation, I said quietly. I spent Christmas alone watching old movies and wondering why Jack only called for 5 minutes between dinner and dessert. Linda's eyes filled with tears. Oh, Ross. I'm so sorry. If I'd known, you couldn't have known. That's how they designed it. Linda shared her own observations of Jack and Heather's relationship, how Jack seemed to defer to Heather in all decisions, how Heather subtly isolated Jack from friends who didn't fit her approval, how Jack's personality had gradually changed from the warm, open boy we both remembered to someone more guarded and materialistic. And there's something else, Linda added hesitantly. Something Sarah would want you to know. Jack called me last month asking if I knew anything about Sarah's family medical history, specifically about addictive tendencies. Addictive tendencies? I repeated, thinking of Jack's gambling. He said it was for a medical questionnaire. But he sounded strange. When I asked if everything was okay, he got defensive and changed the subject. This new information aligned with what Frank had uncovered about Jack's gambling problems. I wondered if my son was beginning to recognize he had a problem, or if he was simply looking for a way to blame his behavior on genetics rather than taking responsibility. Armed with better understanding and legal protection, I implemented the next phase of my plan. I began attending all family functions again, politely correcting misinformation about my health and mental state. I reconnected with old friends and business associates, making sure people saw me as engaged and sharp. And most importantly, I pretended to consider early retirement, leading Jack and Heather to believe their plan was working. I've been thinking about stepping back completely, I told Jack during a company meeting, watching his eyes light up. Maybe it's time for the next generation to take over. Jack could barely contain his excitement. I think that's wise, Dad. You deserve to enjoy your retirement. We can start transitioning responsibilities right away. No rush, I said mildly. I want to do this properly. Let's say we aim for the end of the year? Jack agreed readily, already mentally spending his inheritance. That same afternoon, I overheard him on the phone with Heather. It's happening, he said in a hushed voice. Dad's finally talking about full retirement. We just need to keep the pressure on for a few more months. The following Sunday, Jack and Heather invited me to their home for dinner, something that had become increasingly rare. I accepted, curious to see their next move. The house looked different. Several expensive new pieces of furniture had appeared, along with a large television that must have cost thousands. Heather wore a new diamond tennis bracelet I hadn't seen before, and Jack had a high-end watch that wasn't in his usual budget. They were already spending the money they thought was coming their way. Throughout dinner, Heather was uncharacteristically solicitous, refilling my wine glass and asking about my retirement plans. I played along, sharing vague ideas about traveling and maybe moving to a condo downtown. The upkeep on your house must be getting to be too much, Heather suggested smoothly. All those stairs, that big yard. Wouldn't it be nice to have something more manageable? You might be right, I agreed. Change could be good for me. As I was leaving, Heather's mask slipped momentarily. I had mentioned possibly volunteering at the company, even after retirement, to help with the transition. That won't be necessary, she said sharply, then caught herself. I mean, Jack will want to establish his own leadership style. It might be confusing for the employees if you're still around. Of course, I said mildly. Jack should make the company his own. The flash of naked triumph in her eyes told me everything. She thought they had won. The very next day, Frank contacted me with alarming news. They've listed the house for sale, he said without preamble. Not publicly yet, just with a pocket listing through a realtor friend of Heather's. They're asking $850,000. My house. The one I had bought for them. The one still legally in my name. They were trying to sell it out from under me. There's more, Frank continued. Based on emails I've intercepted, they're planning to move to Arizona once the sale goes through. Jack's been in talks with a construction company in Phoenix. They have no intention of running your business, Ross. They're going to strip it for assets and leave. As the truth of their betrayal fully crystallized, I felt an odd sense of calm replace the hurt and confusion. I had been holding out hope that there was some explanation, some way to salvage my relationship with my son. Now I knew there wasn't. Jack and Heather had made their choices, and it was time I made mine. I called Margaret. I need to protect everything immediately, I told her. No more waiting. I'll file the paperwork today, she promised. By tomorrow, they won't be able to touch anything without your explicit permission. That night, I sat in my living room looking at old photographs. Jack as a toddler on Sarah's lap. Jack on his first bicycle, my hand steadying the seat. Jack in his cap and gown at high school graduation, his arm around my shoulders. Where had that boy gone? At what point had he decided that taking from me was better than working with me? The next morning, as legal protections were being put in place, I received a text from Jack. Dad, great news. A friend of Heather's might be interested in buying your house when you're ready to downsize. No realtor fees. Let's talk soon. The bold-faced lie was the final confirmation. It was time to move from defense to offense. With Margaret's help, I began systematically securing my assets and business interests. First, we changed the signatory requirements on all company accounts, requiring my approval for any expenditure over $5,000. Next, we halted several questionable projects Jack had initiated, citing review of financial viability. Finally, we quietly transferred majority control of the business to a trust with clear succession plans that required specific performance metrics before Jack could assume leadership. He'll notice these changes soon, Margaret warned. Be prepared for confrontation. She was right. 3 days later, Jack stormed into my office, waving a notice from the bank. What is this? He demanded. Why can't I authorize the payment to Bradley for the joint venture? What joint venture? I asked calmly. The one I've been negotiating for the past month. The contract that's going to expand our business into commercial properties. Dad, we've talked about this. We had never discussed any joint venture with Bradley Construction, our main competitor. This was the first I was hearing of it. Sit down, Jack, I said firmly. We need to talk. For the next hour, I questioned him about decisions he'd made without my knowledge or approval, about funds that had been allocated to projects showing suspicious losses, about meetings with competitors that had never been mentioned in company reports. As I pressed, Jack's demeanor changed from indignation to defensiveness, and finally to a kind of desperate anger. You're holding me back, he exploded. I'm trying to modernize this company, take it in new directions, and you're still running it like it's 1990. The industry has changed, Dad. Either change with it or get out of the way. This company has been profitable for 35 years because of the principles I built it on, I replied evenly. Integrity, quality work, fair pricing, loyal employees who are treated well. What principles are you operating under, Jack? He had no answer for that. Instead, he deflected. This is about Heather, isn't it? You've never liked her. You've never accepted her as part of the family. This isn't about Heather. This is about unexplained financial discrepancies and business decisions made behind my back. But since you brought her up, let's talk about that social media post. The one where she asked who should be erased from the family and circled my face. The one you liked and then dismissed as just a joke when I called you about it. Jack had the grace to look uncomfortable. She didn't mean anything by it. It was stupid, I know, but it wasn't stupid, Jack. It was cruel. Deliberately, calculatedly cruel. And you endorsed it. Dad, you're blowing this out of proportion. People post all kinds of things online. It doesn't mean anything. I pulled out my phone and showed him some of the evidence Frank had gathered. The text messages between him and Heather discussing how to push me out. The emails about manufacturing concerns about my mental competence. The color drained from Jack's face. How did you get these? That's your response? Not denying what you wrote? Not apologizing for plotting against me? Just surprised that I found out? Jack's expression hardened. You had no right to spy on us. And you had no right to try to steal my company and destroy my reputation. You had no right to isolate me from family by lying about my mental state. You had no right to try to sell a house that doesn't belong to you. That last one hit home. Jack's eyes widened. What are you talking about? The house you and Heather are living in. The one your realtor friend has as a pocket listing for $850,000. That house is in my name, Jack. I never transferred the deed to you. I was waiting until you were ready for that responsibility. Clearly, I was right to wait. Jack seemed genuinely shocked. But you gave us that house as a wedding present. I gave you the right to live in it. There's a difference. For a moment, I saw a flash of the sun I remembered. Confusion replaced calculation in his eyes, and he looked suddenly younger, more vulnerable. Dad, I don't understand what's happening here. Why are you doing this? I felt a profound sadness wash over me. I'm not doing anything, Jack. I'm responding to what you and Heather have been doing. For months, probably years, you've been working to undermine me, isolate me, and take what I've spent my life building. The real question is, why are you doing this? What happened to the values I thought I raised you with? Jack's face flushed with anger again. You raised me to be dependent on you, to always need your approval, your money, your wisdom. Well, I'm my own man now, and Heather helps me see that I don't need to live in your shadow anymore. Is that what she tells you? That you're in my shadow? Jack, everything I've done has been to lift you up, to give you opportunities I never had. I never wanted you to be dependent. I wanted you to be secure enough to build your own path. By controlling everything? The company? The house? The money? By protecting what I built until you showed you could handle it responsibly. I sighed heavily. And based on the gambling debts you've been hiding, you're not there yet. Jack froze. What did you say? I know about the separate account, the sports betting, the online poker, the $150,000 you've lost. Does Heather know? You had no right, he repeated, but his voice was hollow now. That's my private business. It becomes my business when you're embezzling from the company to cover your losses. Yes, I found those transactions too. Jack slumped in his chair, the fight gone out of him. For a moment, I thought we might be reaching a breakthrough, but then his phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it, and his expression closed off again. I need to go, he said, standing abruptly. Heather's waiting for me. Jack, please, let's talk about this. About the gambling. About how we can fix this situation. There's nothing to fix, he said coldly. You've made your position clear. Now I'll make mine clear. If you don't back off and let me run the company my way, you'll never see me again. Is that what you want? To cut me out of your life completely? It's what will happen if you don't stop interfering. As he stormed out of my office, I felt a deep sense of loss. This confrontation hadn't gone as I'd hoped. Instead of opening Jack's eyes to Heather's manipulation, it had driven him further into her corner. And now I had a decision to make about how far I was willing to go to protect what was mine and potentially lose my son in the process. What I didn't know was that Heather had raised the stakes considerably. As Jack left my office, she was already implementing their contingency plan. The next morning, my phone exploded with messages and calls. Family members, friends, even employees were contacting me, all expressing concern or outrage. It took several confused conversations to piece together what had happened. Heather had taken our confrontation to a new level. During Jack's meeting with me, she had been secretly recording audio through his phone. After he left, she edited the recording to make it sound like I had been threatening and irrational, ranting about taking everything away from them out of spite. She then shared this doctored evidence with family members, along with a tearful video of herself claiming I had become dangerously unstable and was threatening to make them homeless because of paranoid delusions. My nephew David forwarded me the recording. Even knowing it was manipulated, it was shocking to hear my voice twisted to sound so menacing. You think I'm going to let you take what's mine? My disembodied voice growled in the recording. I'll destroy everything you've built. The house doesn't belong to you. I'll make sure you have nothing. Words taken from different parts of our conversation, stitched together to create a fictional narrative of an unhinged, vengeful father. Linda called in a panic. Ross, what's going on? Heather sent me this horrible recording, and now half the family thinks you're having some kind of breakdown. It's edited, Linda, I explained wearily. Jack and I did have a confrontation, but not like that. Heather manipulated the audio. I thought it might be something like that, Linda said. It didn't sound like you at all. But Ross, people are believing it. Sarah's cousins are talking about staging some kind of intervention for you. The situation was escalating beyond what I had anticipated. Heather was clearly willing to destroy my reputation completely to protect her plans. I spent the morning calling key family members, trying to explain the manipulation at work. Some believed me immediately. Others were skeptical, years of Heather's subtle influence having done its work. By afternoon, the battle lines in the family were clearly drawn. Those who knew me best stood firmly in my corner. Others, particularly Heather's family and those who had less direct contact with me over the years, were convinced I was a controlling patriarch, having a mental health crisis. As I was dealing with this family fallout, Margaret called with more pressing news. Ross, they've filed an emergency petition for guardianship over you, claiming diminished capacity. There's a hearing scheduled for next week. Guardianship? They're trying to declare me incompetent? Based on the evidence they've submitted? Yes. We'll fight it, of course, and we'll win. You've had a complete cognitive assessment as part of setting up your trust, which shows you're fully competent. But I wanted you to be prepared. This is getting ugly fast. I hung up feeling a cold anger, replacing the hurt and confusion. Jack and Heather had crossed a line I couldn't ignore. They weren't just trying to isolate me or push me out of the business anymore. They were attempting to legally strip me of my autonomy, to take everything from me. That evening, as I sat contemplating my next move, I received a notification from social media. Heather had posted again, this time sharing her edited audio with a long post about elder mental health issues and how families should protect vulnerable seniors from themselves. My face was prominently featured in the accompanying photo. Something snapped inside me. I had tried to handle this privately. I had hoped to reach Jack, to make him see reason before things went too far. But they had taken this public, and now so would I. I navigated to Heather's original post, the one where she had circled my face and asked who should be erased from the family. It had been nearly a month, but the post was still there, a festering wound in digital form. With steady fingers, I typed my response. The house you're living in isn't your husband's, it's mine. And I just voted to erase you from my property. I hit enter and set down my phone, knowing I had just escalated the situation beyond the point of no return. Within minutes, my phone began buzzing non-stop with notifications and messages. Jack called almost immediately, his voice a mix of panic and fury. Dad, what have you done? What do you mean the house is yours? You can't just throw us out. Check the property records, Jack, I said calmly. The house has always been in my name. I was waiting to transfer it to you when I felt you were ready for that responsibility. Clearly, that day hasn't come. This is insane. We've been living there for 5 years. You can't just... I can. And I will. I've already spoken with my lawyer. You have 30 days to vacate the property. Dad, please. Jack's voice cracked, and for a moment I heard fear rather than anger. Where are we supposed to go? That's for you to figure out. Just like it's for you to figure out how to pay back the company funds you misappropriated, and how to deal with your gambling addiction, and how to explain to Heather that the future she's been planning depends on resources you don't actually control. There was a long silence. Then Jack's voice turned cold again. You'll regret this. Heather was right about you all along. Was she right about the affair too, Jack? Did she tell you about that? Another long silence. What are you talking about? I hadn't wanted to use this piece of information. Frank had discovered that Heather had been having an affair with Jack's best friend Troy for at least 6 months. There were hotel receipts, text messages, photos. I had hoped to spare Jack this particular pain, but his continued loyalty to someone so faithless had forced my hand. Ask Heather about her lunch meetings with Troy. Ask her about the Lakeview Hotel. Better yet, check her text messages. I'm sure it's all there if she hasn't deleted it yet. You're lying, Jack said, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. You're making this up to turn me against her. Why would I need to make anything up, Jack? The truth is damning enough. But don't take my word for it. Look for yourself. After I hung up, I sat in my silent house, wondering if I had gone too far. The evidence of Heather's affair was real. Frank had verified it thoroughly, but using it felt like a low blow. Yet what choice had they left me? They had tried to destroy my reputation, steal my company, sell my property, and have me declared incompetent. They had pushed me to this point. The family exploded into chaos following my public comment. Sides were firmly drawn now, with no middle ground. Heather launched a full-scale campaign against me, claiming elder abuse, manipulation, and threatening behavior. But my simple revelation about the house ownership had planted seeds of doubt. People began questioning her narrative. If she had lied about owning their home for 5 years, what else had she lied about? Linda became my strongest ally, contacting family members with evidence of Heather's manipulations and reminding everyone of my character and history of generosity. Slowly, the tide began to turn as more relatives recognized the inconsistencies in Heather and Jack's claims. 3 days after my comment, Jack called again. His voice was different, subdued, hollow. I found the messages, he said simply. You were right about Heather and Troy. I'm sorry, Jack, I said, and I meant it. Whatever pain he had caused me, he was still my son, and I took no pleasure in his heartbreak. All this time, he continued, his voice distant. All these plans we were making. The house in Arizona, the new business, the family we were going to start once we were financially secure, and she was, with my best friend. Jack, come over. Let's talk face to face. I can't. Not yet. I need time to figure things out. I didn't hear from him again for a week. During that time, Margaret successfully fought off the guardianship petition, presenting evidence of my cognitive soundness, and exposing the manipulated audio recordings Heather had submitted to the court. The judge dismissed the case and issued a stern warning against further false claims. With the legal threat neutralized, I moved forward with the eviction process. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, signing those papers, knowing I was forcing my only child from his home. But the house had become a symbol of everything that had gone wrong between us, and I couldn't move forward without resolving it. The day after I filed the eviction notice, I received a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of Heather and Troy together, looking intimate at what appeared to be an airport departure gate. The caption simply read, "Thought you should know. She's gone. Left me to deal with everything. Jack." The final confrontation was about to begin. The next morning, I drove to Jack and Heather's house, my house unsure what I would find. Heather's car was gone from the driveway. When Jack answered the door, I barely recognized him. Unshaven, dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he had aged 10 years in a week. She left yesterday, he said without preamble, stepping aside to let me in. Took her clothes, her jewelry, the cash from our emergency fund. Left me with the debt and a note, saying I was a loser like my father. The interior of the house was in disarray. Drawers pulled out, closets emptied. The signs of someone leaving in a hurry or in anger. Troy? I asked simply. Jack nodded. They had it planned for months. The Arizona move wasn't for us. It was for them. Once she got what she wanted from me from us, they were going to start over together. We sat at the kitchen table. 2 broken men surrounded by the wreckage of manipulations and mistakes. I found out about the gambling, Jack said after a long silence. She knew, Dad. She knew all along and encouraged it. Said it was a way to get quick money to speed up our plans. When I started losing, she pushed me to take money from the company. Convinced me it was rightfully mine anyway. How did it start, Jack? The gambling? He sighed heavily. 3 years ago, at a client dinner. The client was big into sports betting. Made it sound so easy. Just a little action to make the games more interesting, he said. I won the first few times and got hooked. By the time I started losing regularly, I couldn't stop. Heather found out when she saw the bank statement. Instead of telling me to get help, she saw an opportunity. An opportunity? To pressure me to take control of the company sooner. To push you out completely. She said if I had full control of the assets, we could cover the losses, and no one would ever know. The pieces were falling into place, the full picture of manipulation becoming clear. Heather had exploited Jack's weakness, used it to drive a wedge between us, all while planning her exit strategy with Troy. "What are you going to do now?" I asked. Jack looked up, his eyes hollow. "I don't know. The gambling debts are real. The money I took from the company is real. Heather's gone, but the mess remains. I wouldn't blame you if you pressed charges. Is that what you think I want? To see my son in jail? What do you want, Dad? After everything I've done, what could you possibly want from me?" I considered the question carefully. I want my son back. Not the man Heather helped shape, but the boy I raised. The one who understood values, like honesty, hard work, and family loyalty. Jack's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know if that person exists anymore." "He does," I said firmly. "He's buried under layers of bad decisions and toxic influence, but he's still in there. The question is whether you're willing to do the work to find him again." That conversation marked the beginning of a long, difficult journey for both of us. I laid out a path for Jack's redemption, complete transparency about the gambling and financial mismanagement, addiction counseling, and a return to the company in a junior role where he would have to earn back trust step by step. "No special treatment," I made clear. "You'll start at the bottom and work your way up, just like any other employee who's made serious mistakes but deserves a second chance." Jack agreed to everything. The alternative criminal charges, complete estrangement, starting over with nothing, was far worse. 2 days later, he moved into my guest room temporarily while we sorted out the house situation. The first few weeks were awkward and tense. Jack attended Gamblers Anonymous meetings 3 times a week and met with a therapist to address the deeper issues that had led to his susceptibility to Heather's manipulation. I consulted with my own therapist about establishing healthy boundaries while still supporting my son's recovery. At work, Jack started as a site assistant, the same entry-level position he had held during summer breaks in high school. Some employees were confused by the demotion, others quietly supportive. I made no public explanation, beyond stating that Jack was learning the business from the ground up again. Heather, meanwhile, had not gone quietly. She filed for divorce from Arizona, demanding half the value of their house and a portion of Jack's stake in the company. A stake that, given his current position, was virtually non-existent. Through her lawyer, she continued to spread allegations about my mental state and Jack's abandonment. Margaret handled the legal response, providing evidence of Heather's affair, her knowledge of and participation in Jack's gambling and embezzlement, and her flight to Arizona with misappropriated funds. The divorce was finalized with Heather receiving nothing but her personal possessions and the burden of half of Jack's gambling debts, a ruling that sent her into a fury of social media posts that only further discredited her claims. As for the house, I made a difficult decision. Rather than letting Jack continue to live there with all its painful associations, I sold it. The proceeds went into a trust for Jack's future, accessible only after 3 years of proven sobriety and financial responsibility. In the meantime, I helped him find a small apartment he could afford on his new salary, establishing the importance of living within his means. 6 months after Heather's departure, Jack had made remarkable progress. He was 100 days sober from gambling, had been promoted to project coordinator based on genuine merit, and was slowly rebuilding relationships with family members who had been hurt by his and Heather's actions. One evening, as we shared dinner at my house, a new Sunday tradition, Jack brought up something that had been weighing on him. "I keep thinking about that social media post," he said. "The one where Heather asked who should be erased from the family and circled your face. I liked that post, Dad. I actually tapped the like button on something that cruel about my own father." "You were under her influence," I said, though the memory still stung. "That's no excuse. I knew it was wrong, and I did it anyway. I let her convince me that you were the enemy, that everything you'd done for me was actually some form of control." Jack shook his head. "The irony is that she was the one controlling me all along, and I couldn't see it. Love blinds us sometimes," I said gently. "It makes us vulnerable to those who know how to exploit that love." "It wasn't real love," Jack replied. "Real love builds you up. It doesn't tear you down or turn you against the people who truly care about you." His insight gave me hope that the healing between us was genuine, not just a temporary reconciliation born of necessity. A year after the confrontation that had torn our family apart, I hosted a gathering at my home. Jack was there, now a trusted project manager at the company, with a year of sobriety under his belt. Linda flew in from Oregon. Cousins, nieces, nephews, family members who had been kept apart by Heather's manipulations were reunited, relationships slowly mending. As we sat in the backyard, sharing memories and catching up, I looked around at the faces of the people I loved. The wounds weren't completely healed. Trust was still being rebuilt. But we were family again, bonded by shared history and genuine affection rather than manipulation and deceit. Later, as guests were leaving, Jack pulled me aside. "Dad, I've been wanting to say something but never found the right moment." He took a deep breath. "Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for being tough enough to cut me off when I needed it, and generous enough to give me another chance when I didn't deserve it." I pulled him into a hug, feeling the weight of the past year begin to lift. "You're my son, Jack. That never changed, even when everything else did." As the sun set over my backyard, I reflected on the painful journey we had traveled. The betrayal had nearly destroyed us both, but the truth, however difficult, had ultimately set us free. Heather had asked who should be erased from the family, never imagining that the answer would be her. The house she had coveted, the inheritance she had schemed for, the control she had sought, all of it had slipped through her fingers because she had failed to understand what truly makes a family. Not property or possessions, but love, respect, and unwavering support, even in the darkest times. In the end, the most valuable thing I owned wasn't my company or my home. It was the relationship with my son, damaged, rebuilt, and now stronger for having withstood the storm. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect yourself from someone you love? It's one of the hardest choices we face in life, drawing boundaries with family members who harm us. If you've experienced something similar, or have thoughts about how I handled this situation, please share in the comments below. Your stories might help others facing similar challenges. And if you found value in my experience, please like this video, subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories, and share with someone who might need to hear that sometimes the most loving thing we can do is stand firm in our truth. Thank you for listening, and remember, family is precious, but so are you.